the Ukrainian government released a list. I should say blacklist. They blacklisted you and a whole bunch of other people. Like, I don't even, what's the criteria for this? I feel like they just threw a bunch of names together, and this blacklist is something officially released by the Ukrainian government, and they put your name on it. What the hell is that? You know, this is the thing that they said that you're spreading pro-Russian narratives because you said that NATO bases are located on the territory of Ukraine. That Bucha was staged and the Ukrainian conflict is a U.S.-NATO proxy. I'm trying to show that on the screen. Yeah, proxy war by Russia. I mean, hold on. Let's tackle these one by one. How
Sure.
are these pro-Russian narratives? You're retired Marine Corps. You don't seem to be just spreading Russian narratives for the sake of spreading Russian narratives. Is this fake? Does that automatically make you a Ruski for saying that? Like, I don't understand this. What is this nonsense?
The first one, to say that there are that there are NATO bases on Russia. I mean, what the hell do you think was happening from 2015 to 2022?
Exactly.
There were NATO bases, full-time military presence. The United States stood up a command. That means they have a flag. They have a ceremony where they unfurl the flag, they hand it off, and they plant the flag, and that's your place. Now, units may rotate through, but it's a permanent training facility on Ukraine soil. Is this Russian propaganda? Then you have to basically accuse the public affairs officer of this military command who was proclaiming this existence from 2015 on. I didn't make up the information, the statistic about every 55 days NATO trained a Ukrainian battalion. That's data that came from a public affairs officer.
Right.
So no, that's, I think the problem is that I'm raising fact, and that makes me an enemy of Ukraine. And if that's what being a Russian propagandist is, telling the truth, raising fact, I guess I am one. But of course I'm not. But that's thing. Bucha. Look, I'm on record with Bucha. I've written about this extensively. All of the forensic data points to the absolute incontrovertible fact that Ukrainian security services carried out crimes against pro-Russian elements of the population of Bucha in late March, early April of 2022. End of story, done. I've said it all along. I will debate anybody, anytime, anywhere, on any platform. Hell, I'll travel to Ukraine and do it in front of the Ukrainian parliament if they want. I mean, I'm not running away from these facts. And all the Ukrainians can do is say, the Russians did it, as if that somehow is a prosecutable case. And then the last thing that I got hit on was the proxy conflict. Well, I don't mean to be too cute here, but Max Boot, the famous Russophile, and who hates Russophobe, I guess. Phobe. Boy, that's the problem when you get Marines speaking Latin. We screw it up all the time. But Russophobia hates Russia with a passion. But he wrote an op-ed, I believe it came out in early July or late June, I think early July, where he said, this is our war too, meaning the conflict between Ukraine and Russia. That's sort of the definition of a proxy conflict. But it's not just, propagandists like Max Boot that are saying this. Lloyd Austin, the Secretary of Defense, pretty much came out in May and said, our goal is to help the Ukrainians inflict so much harm, so much pain on the Russians that they never again seek to carry out this kind of aggression. That is the definitive definition. Again, getting Marines to speak English, we tend to be repetitive, but it is the perfect definition of the term proxy conflict. So I guess Lloyd Austin is a Russian propagandist. The Ukrainians are nailing me for speaking truth. My sin isn't the fact that I have a grasp of the facts. My sin is that I refuse to remain silent about these facts, that I point them out. But it's not just that.
He was from Washington Post. Like he said, he wants the Russian military weakened. That's the Secretary of Defense. Is the Secretary of Defense now a pro-Russian narrative?
But here's the worst part about that list. Russian propagandist. Okay, I mean, there's a chilling effect when you call somebody a Russian propagandist because it does have an impact on employability.
Yeah.
and things of that nature. But you know what? We're big boys. We can handle it. The same day they released the list, though, the acting head of this Center for Disinformation held a roundtable. It was attended by a number of people, including a U.S. non-governmental organization that is funded by the United States Congress, and the State Department sent representatives there, and they coordinated this. So they're not just there as passive, observers. They are active participants in a roundtable that is built upon the release of this list. And the Ukrainians said everybody on this list is an information terrorist who needs to be prosecuted for war crimes. Now, here's the problem. If you want to instigate political violence in the United States, use the term terrorist, use the term war crime. We have some very disturbed people in this country. We're going through a pandemic of mass shootings. And so call people terrorists, and what are you basically saying? That you're giving the green light on people to come in and do what? Shoot me? Beat me up? I mean, you can try and shoot me, try and beat me up. That's your problem, because that ain't going to work. But but I'm worried about my family. Are they going to attack my family? But it's not just me. Diane Sayre is somebody running for Senate. She's Chuck Schumer's opponent. She's now an information terrorist for daring to speak out against Schumer's policies. And here's the ultimate thing. You know who pays the Ukrainian salaries? U.S. taxpayer. Public Law 117128 passed on May 21st. Chuck Schumer pushed it through, prevented Rand Paul from putting in place an inspector general to do what? Figure out how this money was being spent.
Yeah, that's all they asked. There's only one senator asking for just oversight. Man, any budget committee on earth has oversight. This is the most basic goddamn thing, and they're shipping billions.
The problem with the oversight is they might ask silly questions like, hey, these guys calling American citizens information terrorists for exercising their free speech. Who's paying their salaries? Is this the appropriate use of U.S. taxpayer money? Is this a First Amendment infringement? Because apparently Congress has passed a law that abridges the free speech of Americans by proxy. There's the use of that term again, by proxy, to let the Ukrainians label me an information terrorist, supposedly to have a chilling impact, maybe promote physical violence against me and my family and other people. This is just patently un-American. There used to be a time when you could speak out. I mean, during the Vietnam War, we never called. I mean, we had passions on both sides and all that stuff. Yeah. But the college students, I think everybody recognized their right to say what they were saying.
Yep. More or less.
More or less. But I mean, the right. That doesn't mean that they didn't want to punch their teeth, and many people didn't try and punch their teeth. But there was a lot of stuff happening that that wouldn't be allowed today. I mean, Jane Fonda went over and sat in I was going to use a bad word, sat in a anti-aircraft gun, wearing a helmet at a time when U.S. aircraft were flying over Hanoi. That's how she got the nickname Hanoi Jane. That's a far more egregious act than me pointing out facts that are inconvenient. Like Ukraine was a NATO base.
Why is this controversial? You can just Google that. Does that make just observing facts is information coming from the U.S. government is makes you a Russian propagandist? I mean, this is a Twilight Zone episode. This list is just McCarthyist nonsense. It's straight out of the Red Scare. That's it.
Yeah. No, this is not a good time to be an American. And I don't want to overhype the potential threat. I'm not living in fear, but I have to say, words have meaning. And when you're labeled information terrorist, remember, we just finished putting Jinsu blades through the body of a real terrorist, and people are celebrating that act. And when you have the U.S. government giving the green light to the Ukrainians to use the term information terrorist against American citizens for exercising their First Amendment rights of free speech, what signal is this sending? I mean,
Yeah.
are we really the United States anymore? Do we really stand for anything? It's absurd.
Yeah, it's you know, like you said, it obviously goes against all the stated values of the United States. The so-called land of the free. I mean, come on, this is really. It's not that controversial. The stuff that we're talking about here, and I just want to say, like, for me, I feel like we're living in the third Red Scare, because we had two, I think, in the early 20th century, and then one in the 50s, and this is basically like what we had with McCarthyism, right? So McCarthy was a guy in Congress, and he used to hold these hearings where they would basically destroy people's lives. They would destroy even people in Hollywood, people in politics. They just get opponents of theirs.
They were put on a list.
They were put on a list, exactly, and they were called communist sympathizers or Russian sympathizers, and this is basically a reiteration of that. I don't know if it's on the same scale or more or not, but it does share some very striking similarities, a striking resemblance, and I don't know. I just. When they say blacklist, what does that mean? You're not allowed to enter Ukraine anymore? What does it mean?
Look, Ukraine can do anything the heck it wants to. Okay, I don't care. They're a sovereign state. They know my standing. I wouldn't want to travel to Ukraine today. It's a Nazi supported regime of genocidal hatred. They don't stand for anything I stand for. They put up a monument to Stepan Bandera. I want to blow that monument up.
That's
they
disgusting.
named a street after Stepan Bandera. I want to rip down that street sign. My relatives fought against the Nazis in World War II.
Right.
We
Likewise.
defeated that ideology. So why in God's name are we breathing life into it in Ukraine today and calling it democracy? No, if Ukraine wants to blacklist me, keep me from getting on a plane to Ukraine, do it. I've self-blacklisted myself, Ukraine. You're not worthy of my presence.
But
so
Scott,
business.
It's the effect. I think the next point you were going to make is that it's not about what Ukraine does; it's the effect that it has inside the United States, right? On you,
especially when the U.S. government is seen as supporting that.
Yeah.
When the U.S. government is paying for the creation of this blacklist and is then actively promoting, organizing, and promulgating, policies that are derived from the creation of this blacklist. Sitting there supporting a Ukrainian government official who says everybody on this list is an information terrorist who should be arrested and prosecuted for war crimes. At that point in time, normal State Department personnel would stand up and say, no, this is absurd. We are leaving. We won't be a part of this. And then leave and then write an immediate cable back to Washington, D.C. saying, we must cease all funding of this organization because they've deviated from every possible norm and value that we stand for as Americans. And then you would imagine a lawyer would also come in and say, there is some legal we're into a definite gray zone and maybe even cross a red line about improper use of U.S. taxpayer money. I don't believe that U.S. taxpayer money can be used to facilitate the suppression of free speech by Americans. So this is what a normally functioning State Department would do. The fact that Tony Blinken's State Department isn't, that they're sitting there, letting this happen, organizing this meeting, and then giving their green light of approval as Americans are blacklisted. And here's the problem with that blacklist. Ukrainians have been putting out lists of this nature since 2014. Previous iterations of that list have included people who have then been arrested and murdered by the Ukrainian government, the Ukrainian politicians, Ukrainian journalists and people of that. So you're just one, iota away from a blacklist designed to have a chilling effect by labeling somebody something to a blacklist that becomes a kill list. Mm-hmm. And again, is this what the U.S. government is supporting? I know we have a history of supporting death squads, but are we really actively supporting the notion of targeting Americans in America for exercising their free speech rights? And I'm not going to say I could sympathize because I respect people's right to speak out. But if I was getting it wrong, if they could come out and say, Ritter, every time you open your pie hole, nothing but garbage comes out. You have a history of getting it wrong. Well, I don't. I have actually a history of getting it right. Imagine this. If the same system was in place back in 2001, 2002, I'd have been called an information terrorist for daring to say that Iraq didn't have the weapons of mass destruction that the Bush administration was claiming it had. That I would have been arrested for what, war crimes, for telling the truth. No, I'm pretty proud of my track record. I'm pretty proud of my, the fact that before I open my mouth, I do my best to try and double check the facts and to do sound analysis, causal analysis, so that, the predictions I make are grounded in reality, not fantasy. So it's not as though somebody can say, yeah, but you're, I'm not Alex Jones, who's out there just spewing crap and causing harm to the families of Sandy Hook. Okay, I'm the opposite of Alex Jones. You know who the equivalent of Alex Jones is? The U.S. government, who is willingly acknowledged that they declassify intelligence and release it for public consumption to shape public narrative, even though they know that intelligence is wrong.